picture the scenario. It is like 2 in the morning, you're sitting at your desk, your eyes are just burning, and you're frantically cramming for an exam.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Or maybe you're prepping for this massive presentation that could totally make or break your quarter. Or consider a totally different situation. Someone makes a passive-aggressive comment in a meeting, and before you even process what's happening, you snap back with some highly sarcastic remark.
It's instant reaction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if someone stopped you in either of those moments and asked you to explain your behavior, you would undoubtedly provide this perfectly rational defense.
You'd say, well, I was studying because the material is difficult and I need to be prepared.
Yes. Or, you snapped because that colleague was being unprofessional and they just needed to be checked. We all navigate our professional and personal lives operating under this foundational belief that we are highly logical, rational creatures making these really calculated choices.
I mean, it is a comforting narrative, right?
Yeah.
We want to believe our intellect is in the driver's seat, like we're just evaluating data and making optimal decisions.
But the reality, and this is what we are unpacking in today's deep dive, is that our logic is often just a very convincing facade. Our emotions are actually the ones running the show, just dictating our actions completely behind the scenes.
Completely.
So we're pulling today from David J. Lieberman's work, specifically his insights in the psychology of emotion. And the mission of this deep dive is to help you figure out how to master your internal state. We're looking at how to take raw, volatile emotional surges that usually control your behavior and basically transform them into disciplined, strategic tools for peak professional performance and personal growth.
And, to get there, we really have to completely dismantle how we think about decision-making. So Lieberman introduces a concept that fundamentally shifts the paradigm. He calls it the lawyer versus judge dynamic.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does that mean?
Well, if you ask most people how their mind works, they'll describe their logical brain as a judge sitting in a courtroom.
Right.
They think their intellect carefully weighs the evidence,
Right.
considers precedents, and then, hands down a rational verdict.
Which sounds great on paper.
It does. But biologically and psychologically, the brain is not the judge. The brain is merely the lawyer. The emotion is the judge.
Wait, so even my careful, thought-out decisions are just my brain playing defense attorney for my feelings.
Yeah.
I spend hours building complex spreadsheets to decide on business strategies. I write out these extensive pros and cons lists before making major life choices. You're saying those spreadsheets and lists aren't me being a judge. They are just my internal defense attorney building a case for a feeling I already had.
In the vast majority of your daily choices, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Oh, wow.
The verdict, the actual decision, it happens in a split second.
Yeah.
Your emotional center issues a ruling. Guilty or not guilty, approach or avoid, buy or don't buy. And it happens so fast you don't even register it consciously.
That is wild.
Right. And the moment that emotional gavel drops, your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical analytical part of your brain, it just scrambles to fabricate evidence to justify the decision.
So it's working backwards.
Exactly. You get into a heated argument and your logic immediately builds the case. They provoked me, their tone was disrespectful. Or you decide to procrastinate on a project and the lawyer steps in and says, oh, well, I'll actually produce better work tomorrow when my mind is fresh.
Right, right.
The emotion makes the call. The logic is literally just doing PR to ensure you maintain your self-image as a rational adult.
Okay, if I accept that my intellect is just running a PR campaign for my feelings, it begs a massive question. Why is the lawyer working so hard? What are we trying to hide from ourselves that requires this constant internal spin room?
Well, we are hiding our underlying motivations. The source material highlights something called the 80% rule.
The 80% rule, okay.
Yeah, it posits that a staggering 80% of our daily subconscious decisions are not driven by pure logic, or even by practical utility.
Then what are they driven by?
They're driven by a deeply ingrained evolutionary need for social validation and tribal belonging.
Wow.
Admitting that our choices are heavily dictated by this desperate need to be accepted or admired by others is deeply uncomfortable to our modern ego. So the lawyer brain just disguises it.
The luxury watch case study from the text really illustrates this perfectly. I mean, a professional walks into a boutique and sees a wildly expensive watch. From an emotional standpoint, the ego and the desire to signal status make the purchase decision instantly.
Instantly, yes.
But nobody walks out of a store and tells their peers, hey, I just spent $20,000 because I need you to think I am successful.
Well, right. The lawyer brain would never allow that admission. It's too embarrassing.
Exactly. The moment the emotional judge rules to buy the watch, the logical defense attorney drafts the talking points.
Yeah, the buyer tells themselves, and everyone who asks, that it's about the craftsmanship.
Right, it's a piece of horological history.
Yeah. Or it will appreciate in value, so it's a savvy financial investment. And the craftsmanship and the investment angles might be factually true, but they are not the reason for the purchase. They are just the alibi.
That's so true. And you see this play out in interpersonal dynamics, too. Think about the early stages of dating. Like when you first meet someone and they give you attention and validation, your emotional state elevates.
Oh, yeah. Everything is great.
Right, because you feel good,
Yeah.
your lawyer brain immediately starts building a case for why this person is objectively amazing. You highlight their intelligence, their humor, their potential.
You're just pulling all the positive data points.
Exactly. But if a month later, that exact same person starts leaving your messages on red, your emotional state plummets into insecurity or rejection.
And then what happens?
Suddenly, the exact same logical brain reevaluates the exact same data points. Now, they are intelligent, they're arrogant, they are independent, they're emotionally unavailable.
Exactly. The person didn't fundamentally change their character in 30 days. Your emotional baseline shifted, so your lawyer just rewrote the entire legal brief to match the new verdict.
Man, that is so uncomfortable to admit.
It is, which is why mastering your internal state requires this really aggressive level of self-honesty. You have to audit your motivations.
Right, like you have to ask yourself, did you join that expensive gym for your health or to impress others?
Are you pursuing a specific executive promotion because you're genuinely passionate about the operational challenges of that role?
Mhm.
Or is your subconscious driving the decision because you crave the societal respect and authority the title projects?
Right. Recognizing that 80% of your choices are influenced by this subconscious social maneuvering is really the necessary first step to converting those blind reactions into conscious strategic victories.
Absolutely.
But, knowing that my emotions are secretly pulling the strings doesn't really explain the mechanism. We tend to talk about emotions as if there are these abstract, ethereal clouds floating through our consciousness.
Yeah, like they're just magic.
Right. If they're powerful enough to bypass my logical brain entirely, how is that physically happening? What exactly is an emotion on a mechanical level?
It is entirely biochemical. Emotions are not abstract concepts. They are literal, measurable chemical and electrical reactions happening in your nervous system.
Literal chemicals.
Yes, they are designed by evolution to physically hijack your brain's executive decision-making process when survival is on the line.
Okay, but I'm not running from a tiger in the office.
Exactly. The problem is that our biology hasn't updated to distinguish between a physical predator and a stressful email. Let's look at the mechanics of, say, dopamine and cortisol cycles, especially during high-pressure situations.
Okay, let's start with dopamine. The common understanding is that it's just the happiness or reward chemical, right? Like you close a massive deal, dopamine hits, you feel great. But how does that actually distort my executive function?
So dopamine is actually less about happiness and more about motivation and reward prediction. When you get a massive surge of dopamine, say, after a major professional victory, it physically alters your risk assessment pathways.
Wait, physically alters it?
Yeah, it suppresses the brain's ability to visualize negative outcomes. You become highly risk tolerant.
Oh, wow. So you feel invincible.
Right. You might suddenly agree to take on 3 new massive projects or make a highly speculative investment. It's not that your capabilities actually expanded in that moment. It's that the chemical flood is making the environment look artificially secure. You are making permanent commitments based on a temporary chemical high.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And the inverse of that would be cortisol, right? The
Yeah.
stress hormone.
Exactly.
So if I'm anticipating a brutal quarterly review, cortisol spikes. But if cortisol is an evolutionary tool designed to help me survive a threat, shouldn't it make me hyper-focused and ready to fight? Why does it so often result in freezing, like just staring blankly at a screen, unable to type a single word?
That's a great question. It's because of where cortisol directs your physical resources. When cortisol floods the system, your body prepares for physical survival. It literally reroutes blood flow and glucose away from the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the logic center.
Right. The area responsible for complex problem solving, nuanced language, and long-term planning. It takes the fuel from there and sends it to the amygdala and the major muscle groups.
So my brain is literally starving my lawyer of the resources it needs to function.
Yes, executive decision-making freezes because the biological system has decided that contemplating complex strategy is a waste of energy when you are supposedly about to be eaten. It forces you to play it safe, avoid risks, and default to the most ingrained basic survival habits.
Which explains adrenaline, too, I guess. The text mentions the classic traffic altercation. Someone cuts you off and flips you off, adrenaline spikes, and suddenly your only goal is retaliation.
Right. In that moment, your visual field actually narrows. Your heart rate variability drops.
Mhm.
Your complex biological system has been entirely commandeered by a single perceived slight.
A complete hijack.
Completely. And if we look at a drop in serotonin, which manifests as sadness or depression, the mechanism is equally profound. Serotonin helps regulate how we perceive our position in a hierarchy and our general sense of well-being.
So when that drops.
When it drops, it acts like a filter over your perception, meaning it's just stripped away. Projects you were highly motivated to tackle yesterday suddenly feel like insurmountable burdens today.
What's fascinating here is the danger of mistaking a chemical weather system for a permanent reality. Like, I might think my career is meaningless and I'm a failure, when the mechanical truth is just that I have a temporary biochemical imbalance.
Exactly.
From chronic sleep deprivation, a poor diet, and back-to-back stressful meetings, I'm basically reacting to poor biology and interpreting it as a poor life.
And the cost of that misinterpretation is massive. The source notes that a vast majority of the population operates as reactive slaves to these chemical spikes.
Reactive slaves, that's a strong phrase.
It is. People often build their entire identities around being strong or independent. But when you examine their behavioral mechanics, that strength is incredibly fragile.
The WhatsApp blue tick example from the research really drives this home for me. Like, if you consider yourself this formidable, highly rational professional, but your entire evening is ruined because a colleague or a romantic interest read your message and didn't reply for 3 hours.
Right.
Your strength is an illusion. Your internal state is completely externalized. You're a slave to that blue check mark.
Yeah. If we move away from the common analogy of emotions driving a car, think of your reactive emotional brain as an overzealous spam filter on an email server.
Oh, I like that.
Evolution programmed this filter to keep you alive.
Yeah.
But in the modern world, it starts flagging everything as a lethal threat. A delayed text message is flagged as social excommunication.
Right. A critical piece of feedback from a boss is flagged as an existential threat to your survival.
Exactly. If you don't learn to manually audit and override this spam filter, you spend your entire life reacting to false alarms.
It's like sitting in the backseat of a car where your emotions are driving. Anger is slamming the gas, fear is hitting the brakes, and attachment is just jerking the steering wheel around, which leads to the destructive misuse of these raw energies.
Yes.
Like anger, when left to the overzealous filter, just breaks things. You fire off an aggressive email, you damage professional trust, and you are just left with guilt.
Right, and fear acts as a permanent stop sign. It convinces you to abandon ambitious projects and settle for mediocrity because the filter claims the risk is lethal.
And sadness turns into isolation, closing doors to opportunities and pushing people away. We're generating all this raw power, but we're just letting it electrocute our own systems.
That is the reactive personality pattern in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But the alternative is to become a master architect of your internal state.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. How do we kick the emotions out of the driver's seat and turn them into the engine instead?
Well, the core thesis of Lieberman's work is that successful individuals do not suppress these chemical spikes. They weaponize them.
Weaponize them. That sounds aggressive.
It does, but here it means capturing the energy and directing it purposefully. They transform raw emotional surges into disciplined professional action plans.
How do we actually translate these specific chemical spikes, anger, fear, and sadness, into fuel for personal growth? Let's start with anger, because it is definitely the most volatile.
Anger is high-octane fuel. Mechanically, your body is optimized for action. You've got increased blood flow, sharpened focus, prime muscles.
So you're ready to go.
Exactly. The mistake is trying to suppress it or venting it uselessly. Weaponizing anger means channeling that physiological arousal into an incredibly demanding task.
Like what?
You use the adrenaline to double your work speed, to systematically dismantle a complex problem, or to push through a grueling physical workout. The source uses the case study of Michael Jordan.
Oh, right. The basketball legend.
Yeah. He was notorious for taking small, sometimes even fabricated slights from opposing players and using that perceived disrespect to trigger an anger response.
He'd just invent a reason to be mad.
Basically, yeah. But he didn't punch the opposing player. He weaponized the chemical spike to elevate his focus and physical dominance on the court. Anger is just fire. If you leave it unattended, it burns your house down. If you contain it in an engine, it drives you forward.
Man, that's powerful. Now, fear is the one I find most fascinating because it usually paralyzes executive function, like we talked about earlier. How do you weaponize cortisol?
By reframing fear from a barrier to a
Oh,
compass.
compass. Okay.
Yeah. When you experience fear regarding a professional challenge like public speaking, launching a new product, or having a difficult conversation with a partner, your brain is signaling that you are at the edge of your current capability.
Ah.
Where there is the most fear, there is the highest density of potential growth. Master architectures don't lack the cortisol spike. They still feel the fear.
They just interpret it differently.
Exactly. They've trained their logic to interpret the spike differently. When the cortisol hits, instead of the lawyer brain arguing, oh, we should avoid this, the lawyer argues, this physical discomfort is the map pointing directly to our next evolution.
Fear becomes the indicator that you are moving in the right direction.
Yes.
That makes sense for high energy states like anger and fear. But sadness is inherently low energy. Like a drop in serotonin physically makes you want to retreat. How do you turn a chemical signal that makes everything feel meaningless into a strategic tool?
Sadness is the reset alarm. Culturally, we view sadness as a defect to be medicated or distracted away.
Right.
But biologically, it is a highly intelligent signal indicating a mismatch between your environment and your internal needs.
Like you're on the wrong path?
Right. You might be in the wrong career, compromising your values, or surrounded by the wrong tribe. The reactive pattern is to wallow in it or numb it. Weaponizing sadness requires using that low-energy introspective state for deep auditing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Historically, artists and philosophers have utilized this state for deep work, recognizing that the withdrawal of outward energy allows for intense internal focus. It's the necessary biological state for realizing that your current path is flawed and plotting a new one.
This completely reframes what highly effective leadership looks like. Optimizing leadership through conscious emotional mastery doesn't mean becoming some unfeeling robot.
Not at all.
It means recognizing that you're experiencing the exact same adrenaline, cortisol, and serotonin fluctuations as the person who is failing. The difference is the routing system. You have a mechanism for processing the chemical spikes.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the actual application, because knowing this theory is great, but when I'm in the middle of a high-pressure situation and the amygdala has already hijacked my prefrontal cortex, how do I physically intercept that?
Well, the source outlines a four-step framework for a personal emotional audit. Let's break down the mechanics of how this reclaims control over those 80% subconscious choices.
Perfect. Walk me through it.
The first step is the foundation of the entire system. Pause. When you encounter a trigger, you must enforce a mandatory 10-second buffer before executing any reaction. No typing, no speaking.
The mechanics of that 10-second window are crucial. It's not just a nice idea. You are literally waiting for the initial flood of neurotransmitters to begin metabolizing.
Precisely.
You're buying time for the blood flow to return to the prefrontal cortex so your logic can actually come online.
Yes. You cannot outthink an adrenaline spike in the first 3 seconds. You just can't. You have to wait it out. Once you have paused, step 2 is label. You must identify and name the specific emotion you are experiencing.
So just realizing I'm mad.
More specific than that, you don't just think, I'm upset. You state, either mentally or aloud, I am experiencing a massive spike of anger right now because my authority was challenged.
I have seen research on this. It's called affect labeling.
Yeah.
Just the act of putting a specific linguistic label on a feeling forces the brain to utilize the prefrontal cortex, which physically dampens the activation in the amygdala.
It does.
By naming it, you're literally pulling the emergency brake on the chemical hijack.
Exactly. You are re-engaging the intellect, which allows for step 3, redirect.
Okay, redirect.
Now that the logic is back online, you take the raw physiological arousal and apply it to a constructive task. If you paused and labeled anger, you immediately take that energy and tackle the most complex, high-friction task on your desk.
Right, because you have all that fuel.
Yes. If you labeled fear, you identify the smallest possible micro-action you can take toward the intimidating project to break the cortisol paralysis. You take the fuel that was going to power a destructive reaction and route it into your professional action plan.
And the final step is repeat. I imagine this isn't a one-time life hack.
No, it's about neuroplasticity. The first time you try to pause, label, and redirect, it will feel incredibly clunky and difficult. Your neural pathways are heavily insulated for reactive behavior.
Right, it's a habit.
But every single time you execute this four-step audit, you are laying down myelin on a new neural circuit. Over time, your brain physically changes. Your subconscious begins to automatically interpret chemical spikes as prompts for strategic action rather than triggers for defensive behavior.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are fundamentally shifting your identity. You are no longer someone who is a victim to their biology. You are the architect of your response.
Which culminates in the final philosophical insight from the material, the mirror of life.
The mirror of life.
The premise is that your experience of the world is not a random series of external events happening to you. Your life is a perfect three-dimensional printout of your internal emotional patterns.
Like looking through a specific colored lens.
Exactly.
If my baseline internal state is heavily skewed toward insecurity and fear, my lawyer brain is constantly scanning the environment for evidence to validate that state. I will interpret a completely neutral email from my boss as a threat.
Yeah.
I'll view a friend being busy as a personal rejection.
The environment didn't attack you. Your internal state projected an attack onto a neutral environment. If you want to change the reflection in a mirror, you cannot do it by trying to wipe the glass. You have to change what is standing in front of it.
Wow.
If you want your professional and personal life to look different, you have to do the grueling work of changing your internal emotional baseline.
This means every single morning we wake up with a distinct choice. We can hit repeat on our old survival patterns, letting an overzealous spam filter dictate our mood, our productivity, and our relationships. Or we can consciously take on the friction of mastering our internal state. We can choose to pause, label, redirect, and weaponize.
The autonomy is always there. The question is whether we're willing to audit the uncomfortable truth of our own motivations to claim it.
We have covered incredible ground today. We dismantled the illusion of our logical choices, revealed the mechanics behind how dopamine and cortisol hijack our high-pressure decision-making, and laid out a really concrete framework to transform raw, volatile emotion into strategic power. But I want to leave you with a final thought to examine as you navigate the rest of your week. Think back to the scenarios we started with, the frantic late-night cramming or the reactive snap at a colleague. If it's true that 80% of your daily choices are secretly driven by a desperate subconscious need for social validation and tribal belonging, and if it's true that your deepest, most profound feelings are often just chemical reactions that can be paused, audited, and redirected, whose validation are you actually chasing with your career, your purchases, and your relationships? And if you successfully strip away all of those defensive, reactive habits, utilizing this four-step framework to master your internal state, how much of your so-called authentic self is really just an unaudited chemical habit you haven't bothered to break yet? Something to think about. See you on the next deep dive.